7-year-old Haruno's black eyes sparkled with delight. Her cousin Yoki's kimono swished and flared in the to the lifting Japanese music. The year was 1931, and 15-year-old Yoki was visiting her grandfather's farm in a beautiful valley near San Francisco, California. That evening, the community was performing a kabuki play. A kabuki play is a style of Japanese theater that tells stories with song and dance. The old hall would be filled with Japanese farmers and their families. They now lived in America but still enjoyed the customs and drama of kabuki. Yuki had learned several native Japanese dances and planned to perform at intermission. "Come, Haruno," Yuki beckoned to her small cousin. "You may be young, but you are big enough to learn the dance." Haruno jumped up and followed Yuki's every move with her head and hands, just as she had followed with her eyes. A gentleman from the big city was watching and was impressed. "This child has tremendous talent," he told Haruno's mother. "She should go to the Takajampabana dance school in Tokyo. She will learn the beautiful Japanese dances and become a great dancer." Haruno knew only that she loved to dance, but her parents did not forget the gentleman's words. 5 years later, she boarded a ship with her grandparents and returned to Japan. Each day she went to school and then to her dance lesson. She stayed longer each time, watching the other students, learning their dances as well as her own. Sometimes Haruno was lonely for her family. She wrote them letters about her life in Japan. Then her cousins would come to visit, and the days would be filled with fun and laughter. It was just like being back home. One day, grandfather called for Haruno to come speak with him. "Haruno," he said, "it is time for you to go home. Things are changing. Very soon, I feel that Japan and the United States may be at war." Haruno was startled. She loved both of her countries. How could they ever fight each other? But she knew her grandfather was wise and she must listen to him. Grandfather continued, "Before you go, you must receive your dancing name. You have worked long and hard for it. I want you to take it back to America, something valuable from your time in Japan." The very next week, Haruno stood poised before the headmaster of the dance school. As soon as he nodded, she began to dance with all her heart and skill. Her dance teacher came to her side. "My name is Shoho, bird of paradise, and I have taught you well. So I give you a name that shows you are my student. You will be Shohomi Tabakanaya, a beautiful bird of paradise who learned to dance at Tabakanaya." In November 1941, Haruno Shomi sailed back to her home in California. Within a few weeks, the United States and Japan began fighting World War II. Overnight, the Japanese people living in America were accused of being spies. Japanese Americans looked different from most other Americans. Many people in the United States had never met a Japanese person. Because of this, non-Asian Americans were afraid Japanese Americans might help Japan in the war. Japanese Americans loved their new country and were very loyal. Even so, the United States government ordered them to move from the West Coast. They were sent to internment camps. It was not fair, but Shomi knew they had no other choice. Her family had lived as good, orderly citizens in a good and orderly way. They boarded the bus that took them to the distant Tanfron Assembly Center. When they arrived, Shomi choked back the feeling of sickness as she looked around. The center had been a racetrack, and the smell of horses still hung heavily in the air. The old stalls had been converted into places for people to live. After a few months, Shomi and the other Japanese Americans were put on a train to Utah. 3 days later, they arrived at the Topaz Relocation Center. Like Tanforan, this internment camp was far different from Shomi's comfortable home. Families crowded into long rows of barack apartments. Each room was lit by a single bulb hanging in the middle of the ceiling. They were heated by pot-belly stoves that burned coal and wood. Only the latrines and laundry rooms had running water. Families shared meals at long tables in the dining hall, a large dining hall. They had to report for roll call each morning. Eventually, over 8,000 people came to live in the Topaz Relocation Center. The unfairly imprisoned Japanese Americans attempted to live a normal life. They tried to improve their new community. They planted gardens, created schools, and opened a hospital. Many brave young men joined the army to fight for the country which had treated them so poorly. Despite their efforts, life was not easy for Shomi and the other internees. Because they were living in the middle of the severe desert, they sweltered through the blistering summer heat. During dust storms, fine sand blew through the cracks in the walls. It coated the few belongings that Shomi and her family had brought with them. The people still enjoyed being entertained, so they asked whoever had talent to share it. "Please teach our children to dance," some parents asked Shomi. Once again, Shomi had a stage on which to perform. This was not what I expected, she thought, but I can still share the dances of Japan with the people around me. If I ever want to be a professional, I can never stop dancing, even when life is hard and unfair. The children at Topaz went to school in the internment camp. After classes, an eager group would gather around Shomi. She patiently taught them the delicate steps of the dances that were as familiar as their own thoughts. When she taught her students, Shomi explained the story behind each dance. After much practice, her students were ready for their first recital. Because of the oppressive summer heat, the children did not dress in traditional heavy kimonos. "You may be dressed simply," Shomi told them, "but you must dance your very best. Make the beauty of the land and stories of Japan come alive to everyone who sees you." Parents and friends smiled their appreciation as they were transported to a different, more beautiful time through the children's dance. After 3 long years, the American government realized what a terrible mistake it had made. The war was ending, and the Japanese American people were allowed to live where they wished. Shomi's father wanted to see the East Coast, just what the East Coast was like. So the family moved to Pennsylvania. At first, she could only get a job as a cook, even though she didn't really know how to cook. But she kept taking dance lessons and kept performing and teaching. Then Shomi took a big step. She moved to New York City and began classes at Studio 61 in Carnegie Hall. Like the brilliant bird of paradise, she donned beautiful costumes and shone brighter than dancer of her kind. Shomi began teaching privately, but her talent was no secret. One day, Eleanor Roosevelt, the president's wife, came to see her perform. Then in 1966, Shomi started her own Tabacana dance school in New York City. Several times, Shomi traveled to Japan to learn more dances, like she had in Topaz. She shared these dances with her community when she returned. Everywhere Everywhere Shomi went, people loved to watch her graceful performances. They did not look down on her anymore because she was Japanese. They knew that she had a gift to share with them. What a beautiful gift it is.
Who says a year on the book?
Beckoned. Made a signal by moving the hand or head. Beckoned. Made a signal by moving the hand or head. Converted. Changed from one thing to another thing. Converted. Changed from one thing to another thing. Delicate. Finely skilled or sensitive. Delicate. Finely skilled or sensitive. Donned. Put on. Donned. Put on. Flared. Opened or spread outward. Flared. Opened or spread outward. Intermission. The time between events or periods of activity. Intermission. The time between events or periods of activity. Internment. The process of being confined to a certain place during a war. Internment. The process of being confined to a certain place during a war. Kimono. A loose robe that is tied with a sash. Kimono. A loose robe that is tied with a sash. Orderly. Free from disturbance. Orderly. Free from disturbance, trouble, or violence. Orderly. Free from disturbance, trouble, or violence. Poised. Kept in balance. Poised. Kept in balance. Sweltered. Suffered, sweat, or became faint from heat. Sweltered. Suffered, sweat, or became faint from heat. Swished. Moved with a soft, muffled sound. Swished. Moved with a soft, muffled sound. Swished. Moved with a soft, muffled sound. Sequence. That's what he's working on. Sequence is the order of events. The order events happen in time. Look for time order words in the text, such as first, next, finally, after, yesterday, and 5 o'clock, May the 1st. Compare and contrast. Compare is describing similarities shared between two or more things. Contrast is describing the differences. Word analysis. Words with the same base. Prefixes can be added to the beginning of base words, and suffixes can be added to the end of base words. Both prefixes and suffixes change the meaning of the base word they are added to. Example, harm. You can add, if you add a suffix, less, you'll have harmless. You can add make harmful, and you can make unharmed, all from the word harm, which is the base word. Adverbs. Adverbs are words that describe a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Adverbs tell how, when, where, or how much something happens. Many adverbs end with the suffix ly.